No, my head isn't that big. It's just that I'm leaning back. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Yu-Gi-Oh! 101 discussion video. In this video, we're going to be talking about dueling then and now, or like dueling now and then. Like whichever way you want to put it. Um, yeah. Uh, Let me just toss out uh, this disclaimer. These are based on my experiences and what I've seen, you know, and what I've seen, personally happen to Yu-Gi-Oh, like over the years. I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh since 2002, like when it first came to the United States. So I've been here for every era, you know, of Yu-Gi-Oh. I've been here when, here in the beginning, I was here, like when they introduced, like the first archetype. Um, and yeah, and I've, seen it evolve into what it is today. And this video is basically for the people who are, you know, or like who may be new to Yu-Gi-Oh, who may have wondered, like what was it like, back then, what I'm saying, like in the earlier days of Yu-Gi-Oh, what I'm saying, like what was it like, like before all of these, you know, Exceeds, Synchros, and all these other fusion monsters came out. Like what was it like to play the game back then? And like I thought I would do this video for their sake as well as just to give, like my opinions on how far the game has come as a whole. Like just in terms of us as a trading card, just in terms of us, um, saying like as the Yu-Gi-Oh community, you know, and just basically just give my opinions on that. Like how far the game has come and what do I think about it. Now compared to, saying like what it used to be. Um, so understand that when I say the earlier days of Yu-Gi-Oh, I mean everything that was pre-Elemental Heroes, everything that was out. You know what I'm saying? That was out um, before the Elemental Heroes came out, because we can all agree that Elemental Heroes was pretty much the first official archetype, in Yu-Gi-Oh. They're the only ones that really, had support like that. But I was saying like they were the first archetype that, what I'm saying, that was actually, what I'm saying, um, yeah, like they were the first archetype in my opinion. Like that was the first true archetype in the game. They had other cards that were out, what I'm saying, that were out uh, uh, um, before Elemental Hero came out. What I'm saying, uh, like Swamp Battle Guard, and you had Lava Battle Guard. That family of cards right there, but they didn't have cards that directly, you know, um, supported them. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't have any support cards. You know what I'm saying? Like for themselves. And Elemental Heroes was pretty much that archetype that had that. So that's why I say that Elemental Heroes, like was the first official archetype in the game. And yeah, so let's get started. So what was dueling like back then, and what is it like now? Well, I would say that prior to the Elemental Heroes coming out and all of their fusions and all their support cards, dueling back then was a lot slower. You know, I mean, like there were a few splash cards or what have you. Um, you know, what I'm saying, like such as like um reinforcement of the army and things like that. What I'm saying, like when that was at 3. Of course, we had like Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest back then. Like they weren't as big of a threat as they would be. I'm like, um, if those cards were legal. What I'm saying, like, uh, uh, today. Uh, Back then, like the game, it was way more balanced. That there wasn't. I mean, like of course you had some builds, that were much, uh, you know, that were much more, what I'm saying, uh, consistent with others, or there were builds back then that were, of course, what I'm saying, like better than others. But overall, like the game was pretty balanced. Um, and off the top of my head right now, like I can't think of one build from, like I said, pre Elemental Heroes that was so overpowering that like you didn't have a fair shot to win. Everything was just based on, of course, since I'm saying like that luck of the draw. So duels were like a lot slower back then. It wasn't too many. Saying like I would say there wasn't a lot of builds back then that really took advantage of saying like going first as they do now. Cause nowadays, saying like I'm like going first is pretty much needed in order for you to gain the upper hand in a duel. Back then, it was like you could go first or second, and you would still have a fair shot to win. In all honesty, and there weren't too many builds out back then that, or there weren't builds back then that I can think of that were so devastating that they just gave one side a complete advantage. You know what I'm saying? For example, like with the windups, they had this loop where you can empty out your opponent's hand on your first turn, and if you're not playing anything like I would say like Dark Worlds or anything like that, which most people wasn't, um, then you're pretty much assed out. Like it was like just your luck. You would start off your turn or like your third or like the third turn with an empty hand. So there would be virtually no way for you to defend yourself against a build like that, or like the Injectors, where you could just blow up everything on your opponent's side of the field with like little to no, you know, like sound like little to no drawback, and you can just attack your opponent and just take their life points down to zero. Just blow up everything on their side of the field, and do that every turn. So it wasn't builds back then that made it so unfair for one duel. I mean, of course, you had certain builds that were made to, saying like as I stated earlier, you had certain builds that were just made to beat other decks out there, you know, but it wasn't to the degree that it is these days. Um, like I said, off the top of my head, like I can't think of a particular deck because like I don't really stick with deck names and like deck recipes like that. So like I can't think of like a name of a build that was completely dominant back then. Yeah, like it was pretty much normal monsters, and like the only um monsters that had effects back then that you would really see being used is like Sangan, Witch of the Black Forest, and like just speaking on those two real quick, like what I'm saying, like just as I was like just uh um speaking on earlier, like there weren't too many builds such as like the wind up, or like there weren't any builds back then like the wind ups and the Zectors where like you can just be all one sided in in a duel or whatever. Like I would say that the closest thing we had back then, saying like to that would have been um the morphing jar builds. You know what I'm saying? Like where like you would just saying like deck out your opponent's deck. and you would win like that. Or, what I'm saying, since Sangan and Witch of the Black Forest were unlimited back then, you could, of course, what I'm saying, like get Exodia a lot easier. What I'm saying, because Exodia was unlimited back then too. What I'm saying, for some time. But yeah, like the game, it's changed over the years. It's going from being like this slow, and like also back then, like before I, what I'm saying, like uh continue with everything else I was gonna say. Back then, like you really had to search for cards that, like work together. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't, like archetypes back then, so you couldn't just look up one name and like this long list of cards came down. Of course, like you had your searcher and like the monster that destroys, like spells and traps, and then you have the monster with an effect that destroys other monsters. It wasn't like that back then, so like you really had to search for cards that had, what I'm saying, you know, that had like effects, that could work with each other. It wasn't so simple for you to just search one name and everything would be at your disposal like that. So you really had to look. So back then, people they developed this sense of what I'm saying, like researching that isn't so present today because it's really not needed. In all honesty, so like searching, so like back then, like really making a build was, I would say, it was more difficult than it is now. So like just comparing the two eras, uh, it was, much more difficult because you really had to, research cards back then, and like you didn't really have a choice. If you wanted to make a good solid build, you had to search which cards, like work good together. Um, okay, say like if like you were looking at every card they had in the game and you noticed that this card, you know, like had this effect and this card could aid in this monster's effect right here. So you would work some type of strategy to, you know, or like make some type of build so that these two strategies can work together even more well. You know what I mean? Um, or like like just work well together. Give me a sip of water. Gotta love water. But yeah, like you really had to do some searching back then. Um, and back then it was, you know, like I would say that it was a lot simpler because it wasn't so many, it wasn't too many effects back then. You know, with monsters, like the main thing you would probably get is like on like Grin Maju or like Old Vindictive Magician or what I'm saying, like Man Eater Bug, like little things like that. But it wasn't so much to where it was what I'm saying, mandatory for you to have a monster with effects like this, because like these days, like a monster with an effect is what I'm saying, like the norm. you know if you don't have a monster with an effects, that's pretty much out of norm. That's the modernized way Yu-Gi-Oh is. What I'm saying, like that's the road that Yu-Gi-Oh has taken. Every monster needs to have some type of effect nowadays, and that's just the direction that it's going, and that's what it is. So again, like just what I'm saying, like just comparing the two eras, I would say back then it was a lot more difficult to make builds. Like just compare it to where it is now, to where you can just search one name and like one archetype name and everything will be right there at your disposal. Um, these days, I would say that it's a lot more simple and but yet a lot more powerful. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be like the best way to put it. You know, somebody on YouTube had made like a a vid. You know, like um uh uh stating that that the game nowadays is simple, excuse me, yet powerful, and that's as accurate as you can probably put it right now. Um, it's simple because you know I would say that it's easier for somebody to learn the game or saying like to build a deck. So say like if somebody just saying like they just wanted to come into the game and saying like just saying like just saying like make a quick build just right off the top, then you can do that. There's websites at your disposal as to like what this build does and how it operates and what to use when, things like that. And you have people coming in the game that I'm saying I like they just want like this quick start, what have you. And yeah, but it's little things that these new people coming into the game, it's like it's new, like just because they want to just jump into the game so quick, it's new things that they just end up overlooking, and they end up making themselves look bad. Like you have to learn this game, and yeah, you can learn it from experience. Of course, that's how what I'm saying. Like I learned it from experience, just wiping my phone off here. Um, but you want to make sure that you understand the rulings and just learn as you go along. Because I've seen people make some amateur mistakes, with advanced builds. For example, I was on Dueling Network one time, and this guy he had um uh uh special summon a Stardust Dragon with uh uh Starlight Road, and then I think the other guy he tried to use something or whatever, and then the other guy he used um uh Stardust Dragon's effect in order to prevent his monsters what I'm saying like destruction or whatever. But at the end phase he thought he was able to get his his monster back, and the other guy was trying to tell him you didn't synchro summon the monster properly first. So as the ruling stands, if a synchro monster wasn't synchro summoned properly first, or if any monster from the extra deck wasn't special summoned through its original um like summoning what I'm saying like ways, then you won't be able to revive it from the graveyard or what have you. And he didn't get that, and that's one thing I'm noticing a lot about these new guys that are coming into Yu-Gi-Oh. They don't learn the basics. They don't learn the things that makes the game, I would say, tick. Like they don't learn what like how the game operates, like the little basic things like normal summoning and tribute summoning. I met somebody who thought that was the same thing. That wasn't the same thing, you know. And little things like reading comprehension. You got people who don't read cards like they're supposed to, or they don't understand what they're reading. And you have people that think Solemn Warning can stop anything when the card clearly says like it only stops this. It can only be activated during these times. Uh, it's like these days. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't any people like that back then. I would say even if it was people like that back then, it wasn't as bad as it is now because so many monsters have effects in it these days. So now I would say more so it's a requirement for you to understand what you're reading. That way you don't activate anything wrong, or like you don't use the card in a wrong way. Because back then most of the monsters were normal monsters. You know what I'm saying? At the most, all you would see being used is like Man Eater Bug, Oh Vindictive Magician, or what have you. And you know what I'm saying, like cards like that, Sangan, and you know what I'm saying, like Witch of the Black Forest, uh, um, as well as some other ones. But yeah, it's more so of a need for you to know what you're reading. That way you can play the game, you know what I'm saying, like just correctly. You'll be able to play the game correctly. So I would say dueling back then was, it was slower, and it was pretty much more simple. It was slower and it was simpler for you to understand. But these days, I would say that it's much more simple and it's easier to search for cards. You know, it's good for people who are trying to get into the game. You know, it's easier to search for cards. It's easier to make decks now. You know, it's a good position for like new people that, you know, that just wants to come in and learn, you know, like the game quickly, and you know, like make a build or what have you. It's easier for them to do that now. So yeah, so it's pretty much made for newbies. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mean that in a negative, you know, way. It's meant for new guys. It's easier to learn. It's, yeah, that's basically it. You know, dueling back then was just, you know, saying like you had to. It pretty much back then, you know, saying like it required more thinking because it wasn't as easy to make builds or as easy for you to just, you know, okay, you know, like, you know, saying like I could just read a website and just make this and what have you know, and be told. You actually had to, you know, research a lot more, and you really had to dig for cards that, you know, that worked well together compared to where it is now. You know, and these days it's just much more simple. You know, like you pretty much know what to expect with every build that comes out. You know, even though each of them may do it in a different way, it's pretty much the same thing. You have your searchers, you have the monsters that destroy spells and traps, you have the monsters that summon other monsters, you have monsters that, you know, uh, uh, that, you know, saying like that take out other monsters, and it's just that simple. You know, like the game has gotten more simpler, and it's basically been dumbed down in order for new people to learn the game, you know, quickly. Um, that's it. Now, like, do I think the game is taking a turn for the worse? In many ways, it has, and I think, you know, everyone who's been playing the game back, you know, from since the, you know, since the earlier days. Again, when I say the earlier days, I mean, you know, what I'm saying everything that was pre-Elemental Heroes. Everybody who's been playing the game since the earlier days, you know, we can say that the game has, you know, pretty much just taken a turn for the worse. I would say so. Um, because of these, you know, these unfair builds, I would call them. You know, like there's a lot more of those going around than it was back then, and I don't know, man. It's just not the same. And not to say that it's a bad thing, but the way it is now, it's like the game still needs some adjustments. You know, um, but hey, I'm just a player. I'm not the business. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not the business people or the businessman that calls the shots. I'm just a player that has been here since the beginning, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, only thing that's changed is that the game has gotten more simpler, much more simple, and more powerful. It's easier for beginners to get into, to make builds or what have you. It's easier to search for monsters, and yeah. Now I know I came off as like one of those old timers, like, oh, it's not as good as it once was. Back in my day. I wasn't trying to sound corny like that, and just, what I'm saying, just trying to sit down and, open up some discussion within the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Like that's what the Yu-Gi-Oh 101, what I'm saying, uh, um, discussion sub series is all about, opening up discussion. Like I may not have, had all my thoughts together in the video like I wanted to, but it's primarily just to open up discussion. So yeah, so where do like how far do you think the game has came? Or like um uh so like what's the main thing that you miss about the game from back then, if you were active back then in the Yu-Gi-Oh community? Or like what are some of the things that you may miss from back then? Um and like what do you like about the game now? You know, what have you? But yeah, that's everything. I'm gonna end the video here. I have some other things I need to get to. Oh, let me just plug this in. Voting is still open for now as to what the next A-DSplay is going to be. Right now, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Ring of Fates is in the lead by one vote. Um, Again, I have three new A-DSplays that I couldn't really decide on which one I was going to do. So I, of course, made a video, uh, something I'm gonna have up here somewhere. But yeah, you guys can see what video games that I've selected to be up for vote, and you guys can vote on which one you would like to see. Like I said, right now, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, the Ring of Fates is, saying, like, in the lead by one vote. You have Radiant Historia, and you have Kingdom Hearts 358 in 2 days. So yeah, so voting is going to be closed Friday. I think I'm gonna close the polls Friday. No, better yet, I'm gonna close the polls at the end of today. I would say at like 12 o'clock. Friday. So early Friday morning, I'm gonna close the polls or what have you, and yeah, and that's gonna, and whichever game is in the lead, that's the game that's gonna, what I'm saying, be, that's the game that I'm gonna do the A-DSplay on. So yeah, if you would like to see any of those three games, head over to that video, see which ones are up for vote, and you guys vote. Simple as that. So I'm Azarel. This has been an A-DSplay. This has been a Yu-Gi-Oh! 101 discussion. I'll see you guys later. Peace.